As everyone gears up for the December 18th opening of Star Wars The Force Awakens, I have a little trepidation as a Star Wars fan. I've been a Star Wars fan my entire life. And I have a fear, and we know fear is a path to the dark side, so I choose not to dwell in that fear, but I still have that little bit of trepidation and wondering what if, instead of how great Star Wars The Force Awakens looks through the trailers that are extremely exciting for Star Wars fans, even hardcore Star Wars fans have just gone ballistic, crazy over the trailers that have come out. And the anticipation, every trailer that's come out has shattered records. Everything that has happened with The Force Awakens has been record breaking. And the movie hasn't come out yet. We're just a little short of the opening, less than 30 days from now when I'm recording this. And I'm still concerned. And I'll tell you why. Instead of thinking that The Force Awakens is a smashing success, I think at the box office, if it's good, if it's a solid, true to form Star Wars movie that fits in well with the others, but yet sets itself apart without being too different by having the influence of Disney behind it, if it achieves and hits all those marks, it could be the best day of a young geek's life, lifelong love of Star Wars, but it could also be the worst day. And when I think about this, I think about something that we jokingly refer to as Phantom Menace Syndrome. And Phantom Menace Syndrome started back in the days when computers were still with dial-up, the internet, when you had big towers for computers. And I can remember in the late 90s spending, I think, a whole day at least downloading the trailer for Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. And I believe it had been about, 14 years since Return of the Jedi. So the anticipation for a Star Wars movie was just beyond belief. And I, like so many Star Wars geeks out there that have grown up loving everything about Star Wars, having it be an integral part of my growing up and my life, I was very concerned, but I was even more excited. And Phantom Menace Syndrome is basically the big letdown from having expectations that were impossible to meet. And then seeing the Phantom Menace and realizing, even though its box office was great and diehard fans like me went out and saw it more than once, more than 4, more than 5 times. I was in the local paper for seeing it so many times, and my friends and I, and then just having, in comparison, the early movies, the original trilogy, 4, 5, and 6, then having the prequels. The prequels got better with each movie, but honestly, and I'm not hating on them because there are things I can still watch them, but there's a consensus that The Phantom Menace was the weakest. Attack of the Clones was a little bit better, and then Revenge of the Sith is one of my favorites in the 6 now, almost 7, soon to be 8 and 9 movies, and I guess the standalones. We'll see how that goes. But it was such a letdown to go from those impossible expectations that I had for The Phantom Menace and downloading the trailer that took so long to download just to watch a 30-second trailer that I memorized every frame of it. I could quote everything from the trailers. And for me, I can tell my degree of loving a movie by how quotable it is. And The Phantom Menace had some great quotes for me in there. And we were watching Amy and Jerry, Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. And we were watching it the other night along with Cheryl. It's funny because Jerry, he said, it seems very video game-like, the opening sequence when they're going to rescue the Chancellor, Anakin Skywalker, and Obi-Wan Kenobi. And it was just interesting because that's so true. It was, by that point, it was very video game-ish, but it was still a spectacular movie. And as the movies go, it was probably the most pivotal one, the rise, basically, of Darth Vader, which actually, if I had my way, there would be an episode 3.5, and I would call it The Rise of Lord Vader, or The Rise of Darth Vader, kind of to go along with the book that was out, that was a very good read. It kind of bridges the gaps between episode 3 and episode 4 of Star Wars. And I know that The Force Awakens will undoubtedly be a hit. In fact, the other day, estimates came down that they have pre-sold tickets we're less than a month out from the premiere of the movie, and the pre-sale tickets have already made $50 million on The Force Awakens. So that's incredible. That's unheard of. Will I enjoy Kylo Ren and new group of people? I'm sure I will. But on a deeper level, I was looking at an interview with George Lucas and talking about how he's not really involved with it. And a couple things that stand out, he was talking how Star Wars was always really a soap opera. It's not about spaceships. And he kind of felt, what I got from the interview, that it's like a relationship. When you break up with someone, you don't call them, you don't go to the place they're at and check out and see what new things they're doing. I mean, if you have a breakup like that. So he's saying he's not really going to see the sequels. He's not really involved with them. And when he realized that when he sold everything to Disney was going to go in a different direction, he's like, I really don't want to be involved. And he kind of disclosed the fact that Disney didn't really want to go in a direction that George Lucas wanted to go with it. And George Lucas said, basically, Star Wars isn't about spaceships and all that stuff. It's really a soap opera. It's about a father-son, grandfather dynamic, a whole family dynamic. And it really wasn't something that he would find to be more than that. Not discounting everything that it was, but the fact that the original Star Wars trilogy was more, and the diehard fans will tell you this, was more story-based. And maybe because of the time it was made versus when the prequels were made, they were shinier and newer, when it probably should have been the other way. But the prequels came out when digital movies were, and stuff could be done with special effects that couldn't even be imagined when George Lucas made Star Wars: A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi. So, of course, you had the good actors, you had the stronger storyline, the core storyline there. And then you look at the prequels, the dialogue was very bad in episode 1, The Phantom Menace. The acting was very cardboard-like. But it was still Star Wars, and I'll still defend it and say I loved the prequels, and there are parts of them that Darth Maul stands out, an underused character, and he was, I guess, the Phantom Menace in the whole episode 1. A menace that we find out is eventually the Emperor down the road, but when you look at the prequels and you look at the original trilogy, and then you look at what The Force Awakens is attempting to do, you see that The Force Awakens is going to be more in the style, special effects wise, it's going to be more in the style of episodes 4, 5, and 6. So that's a good thing. I think that was a step in the right direction. But I wonder, because J.J. Abrams has said and we'll see if this holds true, but he's passing it off episode 7 to another director, and I think that's actually pretty much confirmed at this point. So he'll get his one shot at Star Wars, and this is the one thing that he's really loved and really wanted to do. I pray that I saw some lens flare in the final trailer there, and I with the scene with Kylo Ren where he's saying, "I'll finish what you started," where he's talking to Vader's helmet, basically. And I saw some lens flare there I did not care to see. We don't need any more lens flare, and Star Wars isn't lens flare. You can make it shiny and new looking, but it's really not the same thing. It's different. And I just want to make sure that it's not like Star Trek was. So, I'm just a little bit concerned there about that. The Force Awakens, I will enjoy it. No doubt I will go see it. I'll see it more than once. And the better it is, the more I will like it, I'm sure. And even if it's not as good, I'm still going to enjoy it. But when I think of some of the great people, the most creative, the most great storytellers, I think of people like Gene Roddenberry of Star Trek. I think of Steven Spielberg and all the wondrous movies he's done and the different franchises. And I think about George Lucas. And if all George Lucas really ever had was Star Wars, you could do a lot worse, you know? And what a visionary. George Lucas, not so good on writing the dialogue, but definitely having the direction and the story line down. It all came from that inspiration for Star Wars, that for the original trilogy that he had. And it would have been interesting to see, had he not taken time off, had he gone from Return of the Jedi, which actually he had never planned to do originally, but had he done episodes 7, 8, and 9, it would have been interesting to go forward in time and see, you know, what he would have done. And that's always a nice what if. One thing George Lucas did say in his recent interview was the fact that he's tired of making films that people just criticize and pick apart. And now in the age of the internet, you didn't have that. When he made the original trilogy, the internet it didn't even exist then. Now you look at all the social media, you can't even do one thing without a true hard fanboy. If you go the wrong way, a fanboy, fangirl, if you change things too much, look at Fantastic Four as an example. Too much change in that movie destroyed that movie. But I'm sure it was more than what it sounds like, more than what just seemed like on the surface of the movie to be different. Sometimes it's nice to have a fresh take on things, but sometimes you've got to walk that fine line, especially these days. You're not going to please everyone. And George Lucas set out to make a story that he would enjoy. And he was talking in this interview that I saw, and I believe it was on CBS this morning. And he said that the vision that he had, the studios back then said, I don't get it. A dog flying a spaceship, I don't get it. Referring to Chewbacca. And he's like, I know it sounds weird, but trust me on this. And they did. And look what became of Star Wars. But now, according to George Lucas, it's back with movie studios, and it's, gone back and forth, but now he sees it definitely as the studios getting in there and taking over the making of movies instead of having these up and coming producers, writers, directors, creative folk, and basically people that George Lucas said, quote unquote, have no talent for storytelling or making movies. They're just like big studio corporations or whatever that are trying to just put out sequels and reboots and everything else, and they're trying to make millions and billions of dollars by beating the same story, getting a cookie cutter thing and just stamping out another sequel, another movie. Kind of like Transformers franchise, if you think about it. Even though it's had some bright moments and some not so bright moments in it. It just makes you think that what George Lucas envisioned for the creativity is, yes, when you create something, you should be compensated for it. You should be able to make a living off that art. But you get to a point where if you're selling your art simply, or you're making your art simply to make money off that art, are you in any way cheapening that art by making it a commodity? But nobody wants to truly be a starving artist, do they? People want to make a decent living. They want to have that autonomy to create something, and in its natural vision, have that, whether it's a painting, whether it's a movie, a miniseries, TV, if it's a Netflix movie, whatever, TV series, whatever, whatever format, whatever medium you're looking for. But is it true to the vision? Because every good writer knows that everything that you write, you rewrite and rewrite and rewrite. And what may seem like a simple, basic story has changed its form so many times that sometimes it's hard to realize exactly where that story began to go from point A to B to C to D, E, F, and end up at Z and go back to A and B and, rewrites and rewrites. And the secret to a good writer is a good editor, someone who is objective, someone who understands what the writer is trying to create, what the artist is trying to create, but who can help develop that talent and pull the right elements and highlight those of whether it's a story, whether it's a song, whether it's a work of art. There's certain things, certain points you can focus on. And if you're good, it's hard to edit yourself, because you're usually, if you're a writer or even an artist of any type, of any form of art, I think a musician, a singer, you're probably harder on yourself than others will be on you. But now you have the social media, and people pass judgments far too quickly on things that they themselves don't really always know that much about. Everyone these days has an opinion on something. Doesn't mean that their opinion is definitive, but if something goes viral, as it were these days, you can say one thing and that can take off and go in another direction. Maybe you never intended, but most times, hopefully, that's a good thing. But sometimes that's just, you might write a song and have part of it that's a hook that takes off, and that becomes the story of that song. But the rest of the song, people may not hear the meaning of, if you get what I'm saying. It's kind of like when an artist creates a painting on a canvas or whatever their medium is, even if it's 3D, it's computer technology, whatever, is what you originally envisioned always where you end up. So in saying all that, I have faith and belief in J.J. Abrams. He's done some great things that I like. And I hope that he has the utmost respect for Star Wars. And I believe that he will. And I'm glad I don't know too much about the movie. I mean, I know what we all know, and I don't want to know any leaks from the movies. I don't want it to end up on the internet a day or two before I get to see it. I want to have that experience, and I want it to be like it was when I saw episode 1. But even more, I want it to be like, I want that child in me, the young geek back then that was, what, I guess 7, 8 years old. I can't remember when I first saw Star Wars, and I was at least that young. And I want to have that childlike wonder. I want to relive that moment. And it's not so much about capturing a moment in time and capturing the past and reliving the past, because I'm all about the future and I'm all about moving forward and new things. And but I want there to be a soul to it. I not that the prequels of Star Wars didn't have a soul, but they felt very light compared to the depth of story that was in the original trilogy. And this question that I'm going to talk about, it comes up, and I had someone, I was talking at work about Star Wars and mentioning that I was looking forward very much to the Force Awakens, and they said that they had a relative or something, and they had a son, and they weren't sure whether where to start. Should they start with episode 1 and just introduce their kid to Star Wars, starting with episode 1, which is, I guess, chronology. I can't say it. That's the chronological way to do it. Or do you start how he grew up, where you start with episodes 4, 5, and 6, which was the original Star Wars, before it was called A New Hope. Anyway, that's a tough question. And if we had to rate our my favorite Star Wars movies, and I've done this before, but I would. It's hard not to say Empire Strikes Back is not my. It's kind of like saying. See, it's different for Star Trek, because everybody goes to say The Wrath of Khan was their favorite Star Trek movie. For me, it was probably, because I'm a big Shakespeare geek. I would probably say The Undiscovered Country, but very close to that would be First Contact. I really enjoyed First Contact. Khan was not my favorite movie. Was it a good movie? Yes. But I'm a little farther down the road with Star Trek, than some. I'm more a Picard, like I said on an episode before, versus a Kirk. Do I appreciate Kirk? Yes, I do. Was he an awesome captain? Yes. Love the William Shatner, awesome. Patrick Stewart, awesome. I liked different things. But I don't always like everything that everybody likes. I mean, I do, but there are some movies like, and I've talked about this before, and not to get off on a tangent, but the third X-Men movie with the Phoenix Saga. I know it was done totally different and all that, but I didn't dislike the movie. I could watch the movie and I can get different qualities out of it, but is it true canon? And I think that's what we're getting at. Will The Force Awakens stay with that original canon and then just veer off, or will it continue that train of thought while being new, but still retaining its Star Wars-ness, if that's such a thing? I think you see where I'm going with this. So what are your thoughts? I'd like to hear them here at Geek Homeworld, and this is a open-ended discussion, and this is something that I think no matter where you stand on the prequels, no matter where you stand on episodes 4, 5, and 6, I think we're all going to go and check out maybe more than once, maybe more than 5 or 6, or maybe more than 8 times that I saw episode 3, which is a lot. I don't know that I'll see The Force Awakens that much. I don't have that much time, but I know we'll all check it out, and we'll all have our strong opinions one way, strong opinions the other way. But will there be one thing in there that will just enrage all the hardcore fans, or will there be something in there that's going to play straight to that base, that core, and that canon of the original Star Wars, what George Lucas envisioned, what he brought to life? So when we look at things, I wonder how a month from now I'll feel, and I'll definitely be podcasting about that. My thoughts on The Force Awakens, and I'm a little in fear, as I said. Started out, I'm just a little concerned. I'm trying to remain very open-minded, and I think I've done actually very well. But I know what I'm doing in December. I'm seeing The Force Awakens. So I just am not sure. And I think it's going to be fun to figure out and talk about it and dissect it and say how good this movie will be, how good it could have been, how great it was, or how disappointing. And I really don't think it's going to be that disappointing. I really, really don't. So let us know at Geek Homeworld on Twitter, and let us know. Send us your feedback, and as we get closer and closer to The Force Awakens, will it awaken in you the inner geek that has craved episodes 7, 8, and 9, since we even thought that they were a possibility before, when we heard about the expanded universe, which this is going to be different, but we shall see. And hopefully J.J. Abrams will, as Kylo Ren said, finish what you started. So may the Force be with you.